SUNO vocals can be good, but can you make them better? Stick with me, and you'll see how I made them more consistent and actually sound like you. When I found this technology, I paused all my productions to test this properly, and what I found might surprise you. We all know how SUNO vocal outputs can sound drastically different. For instance, listen to these two.
A tremor in the bones, something always wants to hide. A tremor in the bones, something always wants to hide.
So how do we address this problem and get consistent outputs from SUNO? If there were only a way to get vocals from AI that were not only consistent, but also sounded original. Luckily there is, and it might even work in a professional setting. SUNO's persona outputs have improved greatly over time. However, it's not your voice. Some may not care, but the goal for many musicians who need help either polishing or finishing their songs, the answer might just be something as simple as a good reference vocal track. Before I explain how all this works, let's play a game. I want you to just listen. I'm going to play 4 versions of the same vocal, and your job is to pick out the one that sounds the most different from the rest. A tremor in them bones, something always wants to hide. A tremor in them bones, something always wants to hide.
A tremor in the bones, something always wants to hide.
A tremor in the bones, something always wants to hide. Now, which of these sounded most like an AI? Of course, it was C. This isn't really fair, since I already played you the SUNO track. But you did notice a big difference. In the SUNO-generated track, you noticed more artifacting, especially in the high end, where you're hearing the reverb tails. Even small differences can change the feel of a track. The real challenge would be to determine the difference between the 3 other vocals. One, which was a real vocal. The second, that used an AI swapping algorithm that was applied to the real vocal. And the third, that used an AI algorithm that was applied to the raw SUNO track. So let's listen to those 3 again, and we'll see if you can tell the difference. A tremor in them bones, something always wants to hide. A tremor in them bones, something always wants to hide. A tremor in the bones, something always wants to hide. That was a little bit harder, wasn't it? You probably could hear the artifacting in D, but the difference between A and B are very subtle. But if you guessed A as being the real vocal, you're correct. B was generated using an AI swapping algorithm known as ControllaVoice. And D also used ControllaVoice, except it was processing the raw SUNO track and not my vocal. But if we just stop here, this really wouldn't help. We need to go deeper and listen to these in the context of a mix to be able to truly assess how good this technology is. Here we have a rough mix of the song Pushing Me, a song we worked on in the last video, the secret SUNO blueprint to perfect your songs. Be sure to check that video out from the link above. A tremor in them bones, something always wants to hide, but not from danger, not from stillness, a quiet humming fading light, a quiet humming fading light. Now that is pretty cool. Yes, D is still suffering from some of the artifacting, but with some compression, EQ, and effects, it's still quite convincing. Telling the difference between the vocal I sang and the ControllaVoice vocal swap within the context of a mix is so difficult, I would think that one would never know unless they were told beforehand. But now we get to the part where most people either overthink or rush things through, and that's training the voice. What matters here is not perfection, it's consistency. Here we are at ControllaVoice's homepage. Big shout out to ControllaVoice for giving me access to this. The first thing we need to do is train ControllaVoice as cleanly as possible so we get the best vocal swap. In the drop-down menu, we choose Create a Voice. Now this is what I have found to be the most critical part of this entire thing. Notice it says we'll need at least 10 minutes of audio to train the voice model. Keep your vocals clean, record in the right space, minimize and remove all background noise, and just use one voice. This means use the same microphone in the same room, and be sure that where you do it is quiet. My first training, I only did 10 minutes. It was okay, but it could have been far better. After a little bit of digging and some research, I found out that it's best to do around an hour's worth of training. That second training turned out pretty good, but AI training loves consistency. And that second training was a mashup of covers, old stems that I had taken from previously recorded songs, and some spoken word. Then it dawned on me, what I really should do is covers plus singing along with my own songs and spoken word, all done in the same room with the same microphone at the same time. And that third was the kiss. How I did these covers was simple. I went to YouTube, found a bunch of songs that I know how to sing, set up my microphone, put on my headphones so there was a little bleed, and just sang along. I didn't worry too much about pitch. I worried more about pronunciation. If I made a mistake, unless it was really bad, I kept going. I recorded them at the best resolution I could, and then I uploaded it. It could take several hours for it to finish, so I just walked away and let it do its thing. This whole process of doing the covers and getting it all together took me about a day. But remember, if you do this correctly, you only have to do this once. One last tip. I'm not convinced that you need an expensive condenser microphone in order to train ControllaVoice and get a good result. I think any external microphone, even a USB microphone, will probably work great. Okay, we've got our ControllaVoice AI model trained. What now? How do we make sure that the SUNO track that we give to ControllaVoice is as clean as it can be? SUNO bakes in effects. There's no way to remove delays and reverbs, and these effects can leave unwanted artifacts in our ControllaVoice output. So what I do, as you can see here, is go into SUNO Studio and use their built-in EQ to remove as much artifacting as I can. I use a low-cut filter to eliminate anything from 80 to 100 Hertz and down, and I usually do a small cut at about 250 Hertz. Then I use a high-cut filter to try to reduce the artifacting in the reverb tails. Then it's back to ControllaVoice, where we upload that SUNO vocal and use the voice swap feature to get our final track. Once that's processed, we download our vocal file, put it back into our DAW, and give it a listen. My philosophy has always been, there are no bad singers. If you can talk, you can sing. We just get hung up on our voices. What most people really need is just practice, confidence, and the right workflow. ControllaVoice might be the tool that works for you. Because this isn't just about one kind of musician. I've mapped out 6 clear ways this can help depending on where you're at. The chart is a little detailed, so feel free to pause the video if you want to dig in deeper. But here's the big idea. Whether you're using SUNO to sketch ideas, tweaking vocals in your home studio, or just trying to sound a little more like yourself, you don't have to settle for generic SUNO personas. If you sing, this is a path to mastery. If you collaborate, it's a bridge to faster and better demos. If you're learning to sing, it can help you with delivery and cadence. If you have physical limitations holding you back, this is one of the rare tools that can help you push past them. That said, if you're hoping to rip some famous artists' vocal stems, upload their heavily processed performances, and expect clean, usable results, you're probably going to be disappointed. I'm not finished with ControllaVoice. I'm still testing what happens if a completely different singer sings through your trained ControllaVoice. Will the results still be usable? And if you want to try ControllaVoice, there's an affiliate link below. But if you're interested in learning how I built the song Pushing Me, there's an entire video dedicated to it. Same voice, same tools, and more of the how-to, because that's probably the last thing standing in your way. So go watch it. I'll meet you there.